My parents didn't just skip my wedding. They called my fiancé trash, told relatives not to attend, and said marrying him would ruin my life. Not because I had done something wrong. Not because of a family emergency. Because they believed my fiancé wasn't good enough. To them, he was just an electrician. By the time our wedding day arrived, half the seats reserved for my family were empty. I won't lie. Seeing those empty chairs broke my heart. But what happened next changed everything. Right in the middle of the ceremony, my husband said something so powerful that guests started crying. Someone recorded the moment. Someone posted it online. And within days, millions of people were watching the wedding my parents refused to attend. Because the internet learned who my husband really was. And suddenly, the same family that abandoned us was begging to come back into our lives. And before we continue, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more powerful stories like this. And I'm always curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. I love seeing just how far these stories travel. Now let's get back to the story. The day I got engaged should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, it became the beginning of a family disaster. When I called my parents to share the news, I expected excitement. Maybe tears. Maybe questions about the wedding. Instead, there was silence. A long, uncomfortable silence. Then my father asked a single question. What exactly does he do for a living? I smiled. He's an electrician. The silence returned. Only this time it felt colder. A few seconds later, my mother laughed. Not a happy laugh. A disappointed one. I remember looking down at my engagement ring and feeling my stomach tighten. My fiancé, Daniel, was standing beside me, completely unaware of what was happening. My father finally spoke. After everything we've done for you, this is who you chose? I couldn't believe it. Daniel was hardworking. Kind. Honest. The type of person who showed up whenever someone needed help. But none of that mattered to my parents. All they heard was his job title. Within days, the criticism became constant. My mother called him trash. My father described him as a mistake. Relatives started calling with similar opinions. Some suggested I postpone the wedding. Others suggested ending the engagement completely. But the worst moment came 3 weeks later. My parents invited me over for dinner. I thought they were finally willing to talk. Instead, they announced they would not attend the wedding. Not only that, they planned to encourage the rest of the family to stay home too. And judging by the messages that started arriving afterward, their campaign had already begun. Over the next 2 months, the guest list became a painful reminder of what was happening. Every few days, another relative declined the invitation. Some were polite. Others weren't. A few actually repeated my parents' exact words. They said I was throwing my future away. That I deserved someone more successful. Someone with status. Someone my family could be proud of. Meanwhile, Daniel never complained. Not once. Even when he knew what people were saying. Even when he heard the insults. He simply smiled and focused on helping me. Whenever wedding stress became overwhelming, he reminded me why we were getting married in the first place. Not for my parents. Not for relatives. For us. Still, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't struggling. Late at night, I sometimes stared at the growing list of empty seats and wondered whether everyone else saw something I didn't. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe I was making a mistake. Every time those thoughts appeared, Daniel somehow knew. One evening, he found me sitting alone with tears in my eyes. Without saying a word, he sat beside me. Then he took my hand. "If every single person leaves," he said softly, "I'll still be there waiting for you." That simple sentence hit harder than any speech ever could. Because unlike everyone criticizing him, he had never asked me to choose sides. The wedding day finally arrived. The venue looked beautiful. The flowers were perfect. The music played exactly as planned. But as guests took their seats, the reality became impossible to ignore. Entire rows sat empty. My family's side looked almost deserted. Then the coordinator approached. It's time. I took a deep breath, looked toward the aisle, and realized I would be walking down it completely alone. The music started. Every guest turned toward the entrance. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear anything else. This wasn't how I had imagined my wedding day. Growing up, I always pictured my father walking beside me. I imagined smiling relatives, proud parents, a family celebrating together. Instead, I stood alone. For a brief second, the empty seats hurt more than I expected. Then I looked ahead. Daniel was waiting at the altar. The moment our eyes met, everything changed. He wasn't looking at the missing guests. He wasn't focused on the people who stayed away. He was looking at me, smiling, like I was the only person in the room. So I took my first step. Then another. And another. By the time I reached the middle of the aisle, my fear had started fading. The ceremony continued beautifully. The vows were heartfelt. The atmosphere felt emotional. Even guests who barely knew our story seemed moved. Then came Daniel's turn to speak. His vows weren't elaborate. They weren't rehearsed to perfection. They were honest. He talked about loyalty. About choosing people because of their character rather than their status. About standing beside someone when life became difficult. Several guests wiped away tears, including me. What none of us realized was that someone near the back of the venue had quietly recorded that moment. Not just the vows. The entire story. The empty family section. My walk down the aisle alone. Daniel's emotional words. Everything. At the time it seemed insignificant. Just another guest filming a wedding. But before the night ended, that video would begin spreading far beyond the reception hall. And within days, millions of people would be watching the moment my family refused to witness. Without realizing it, our wedding was about to become a story the entire internet wanted to talk about. 3 days after the wedding, my phone started exploding again. At first, I thought it was friends sharing photos. I was wrong. Someone had uploaded a short video from the ceremony. Specifically, the moment I walked alone down the aisle. The camera captured everything. The nearly empty family section. The emotional expressions of our guests. And most importantly, Daniel's vows. Within hours, thousands of people had watched it. By the next day it was hundreds of thousands. Then millions. Comments poured in from strangers around the world. People weren't talking about jobs. They weren't talking about money. They were talking about loyalty, kindness, respect. They admired how Daniel had treated me. And they couldn't understand why anyone would reject him. The story spread far beyond our community. Friends shared it. Coworkers shared it. Even local news pages picked it up. Meanwhile, my parents were learning something uncomfortable. The internet had chosen a side. And it wasn't theirs. For the first time, relatives who had skipped the wedding began reaching out. Not to criticize me. To apologize. Some admitted they had simply trusted my parents' version of the story. Others confessed they regretted staying away. The biggest shock came when one of my cousins sent me a screenshot. Someone had posted an old photo of Daniel helping restore power after a severe storm in our area. Hundreds of comments praised him. Suddenly, people started sharing their own stories about his generosity. Helping neighbors. Volunteering his time. Fixing problems without expecting anything in return. The more people learned about him, the more confused they became about my parents' behavior. Then late one evening my father called. For the first time in months, his voice sounded uncertain. "We need to talk," he said quietly. And I knew something had finally changed. A week later, I met my parents for coffee. Daniel came with me. Not because I asked him to, because he wanted to support me. The moment we sat down, I could tell something was different. My parents looked uncomfortable. Not angry. Not defensive. Just uncomfortable. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then my father finally broke the silence. "I was wrong." Those 3 words surprised me more than the viral video ever had. My mother nodded. Tears filled her eyes. She admitted they had judged Daniel based entirely on assumptions. His career, his background, his income. Everything except the things that actually mattered. His character, his integrity, his kindness. The very qualities that had made me fall in love with him. Then my father turned toward Daniel. "I owe you an apology." Daniel smiled politely. The same calm smile he had worn through this entire situation. He accepted the apology without anger. Without bitterness. That moment told me more about him than any viral video ever could. Over time, relationships slowly improved. Not overnight. Trust doesn't work that way. But conversations became more honest. People stopped focusing on appearances. They started paying attention to actions. As for the internet, the attention eventually faded. Like it always does. But the lesson stayed. Because the real story was never about a viral wedding video. It was about what happens when people mistake status for value. My parents thought they were protecting me from the wrong person. In reality, they almost pushed away the best person I had ever met. And standing beside Daniel that day, I knew one thing for certain. The greatest decision I made wasn't proving everyone wrong. It was choosing the person who had never stopped believing in me. Sometimes the people who judge the loudest know the least about a person's true worth. Character, loyalty, and love will always matter more than status or wealth. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional family stories with unforgettable twists and satisfying endings. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven your family after what they did?